Yes.
You can go, Mackenzie.
Yay, Tim. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to see your faces and names. We're really excited for today. You'll probably see, I think we kind of all recognize each other. You'll see three names in here that may look a little new. There's two Joshes and a Dan. And so they are from there's kind of an inside joke that in order to work with Camp Twin Lakes, you kind of need to have the name that somebody else has there. There's multiple Joshes, a couple of Matts. There's only one Dan, though. That's true. There's only one Dan. And I'll have them introduce themselves, and they've brought some slides with them to share. They are our partner organization. I know a lot of us work with different types of organizations. Some of us run our own programs, some of us rent, some of us work with other organizations. And so we work with Camp Twin Lakes, and I was counting it up, and we started in 2009 with you guys. So it's been quite some time. And they have graciously walked alongside us as we've grown our program, and they've been with us through some growing pains. We've had some wonderful memories together. We've had some hard conversations, and they've been really kind of lockstep with us as an organization through that. And we feel really fortunate to have them as a partner. And we really mean that. They subsidize, I looked at y'all's website to make sure I got this number right, 70% of the cost for us with our campers, which is huge. And it's amazing. They're a nonprofit themselves, and they use their leverage to raise money so that organizations like us can afford to provide meaningful camp programs for our kids. So I could go on and on and on about how much I love Camp Twin Lakes, but we do have a limited amount of time. They didn't pay me for this plug. So I want to dive right in. But one of the reasons I wanted to, and we as the board wanted to share what they're doing, is just to try to help camps think about how we're approaching summer. I think we all know that COVID and the implications of that mean a lot of different things. Last month, we talked a little bit. Some organizations, we're receiving information from our leadership that say you absolutely must do an in-person program, or you have to do in-person stuff, and others are putting together the plan for that. So I felt like it was and we felt as a board, it was a great opportunity to bring Camp Twin Lakes in, because they work with 60 partner camps. So they have a ton of different populations that they serve, as well as different needs of those camp populations. So I think it's a really great kind of template for us to look at. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive right in. If you guys are okay with it, and I know you well enough to know you are, we can just ask questions as people go along. Daniel already said he thinks he has a lot of questions to ask. So we'll just, we talked about doing Q&A at the end, but I think if we just want to do it kind of in as we go, and then we can kind of go from there if that works for y'all. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks, Mackenzie. My name is Josh Sweat. I'm the Chief Program Officer for Camp Twin Lakes, and have been with the organization for about 20 years, and been through a lot of the growth and change that we've been through. And I'm going to kind of take a lot of the lead today and just laying out how we approach this summer. And Dan and Josh will be here giving a lot more detailed background and everything as we go, and as you have questions about our approach this summer. So we definitely want a conversational approach and be able to try and answer as many questions as we can. But I'll let Dan and Josh introduce themselves before we jump into it.
Hey everyone, I'm the other Josh. Not necessarily. It's kind of odd because we do have multiple names, but we trying to differentiate between older and newer, and we haven't really figured out the right way to do that yet. But my name is Josh Caliani, and I'm the camp manager at one of our locations. So I really focus on the day-to-day operations of camp, and specifically, for today, of like how we're implementing all of our COVID procedures to have camp.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan, and thank you for Mackenzie for recognizing there's only one Dan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and Josh Sweat and I have been here about the same amount of time. We've been both a little over 20 years. And my role is, operations, but, my background, and actually Josh's as well, is in recreation therapy. And we're just both really all three of us just so grateful and honored to be invited to talk to you today. We truly believe in the power of the experiences you're giving, and have seen firsthand what a life-changing and life-altering impact you have. So thanks for letting us, even talk to you a little bit today. I hope we have a little something to share. I know we have a lot to learn from y'all.
For sure. Like Mackenzie said, we're a host organization for over 60 different organizations that want to serve kids, primarily for illness, disability, and life challenge. So it's a pretty broad range that we serve, but our intended purpose is to support other organizations that want to have a camp for a very specific population. And we do that in this partnership model where we raise funds together, like Mackenzie said about the subsidy. We, of course, with 60 different partner organizations, there's a multitude of experience and ability within those organizations. So we have to lean in different ways, depending on what the partner's need is. Some do camp year round and are very experienced and have a full team that run it. And we're there to kind of provide the activity support and the sites, all the way down to some organizations come to us and say, we've got some money and we really have a passion, but we don't know how to do this camp thing. So can you direct it? Can you lead it? Can you do everything for us? And we've evolved our business over the years to try and meet all of those various needs. And it's been successful, and including, we like to be joyous this week because on Wednesday, our board just approved us to start our groundbreaking on our third site come in September. So we're really excited that we'll be operating 3 sites, I believe 2023, right, Dan? So hopefully we're ready for it. But we've got a lot of great organizations that are wanting to grow and some new populations that are wanting to be served. So with that, we're not only looking towards being a 3-site organization, we host programs in the community, in the hospitals, outpost programs, so taking kids on camping trips, things like that as well. So we've had quite a few staff to provide this therapeutic process that we like to engage in at camp, through intentional camping, and have a lot of resources. And so as soon as COVID hit, I think like many of you and many businesses, we had a lot of people to support without a lot of business coming in. And it was a kind of a scary time for us, a transition that we all had to go through, in particular because our relationship isn't necessarily directly with the camper, it's through partner organizations. And we're kind of at, the ability level or whatever the partner organization feels like they need to do for their success and for what they need to do for their campers. So we didn't necessarily have a lot of control over what kind of programming we could do. And so we had to get very creative, of course, in this process and lean in to our partners with any type of support we could. And last year, we, like many people, pivoted to virtual camping pretty quickly to at least use the expertise our staff had to provide some type of program that allow kids to engage socially and keep them focused on the camp experience and hopefully providing some connections between kids going through similar things. After the summer was over, we really needed to start thinking about what was going to get our staff back engaged, back doing what they're professionally trained to do, and keep our business going. And so I think that was our first driver and our first thought process as we were navigating COVID, is we've got to think about our business. Of course, we never lost focus on the kids, but we really needed to think about the business and making sure that we were going to be financially healthy. We were going to be ready to do program when things were back safe, and that we could really pivot quickly. And so for us, that meant not knowing how long this process was going to go. We didn't want to lose any valuable knowledge from the staff that we had and the resources we had. So we made some decisions to try and maintain that as much as possible, and needed to generate some revenue. So we continued providing some virtual camps to partners that needed it. But we started doing some exploration, both with other camps that had run summer programs, had done some things, and started looking at one of our signature kind of bread and butter things, which was family camp programs, and looking at what the need was for families. And I think at that point in time, after the summer was over, there was just a lot of comments that we were hearing from people. I want to be anywhere outside of the four walls of my house. I just need to be somewhere. And we wanted to be a support system for that. So we kind of transitioned to almost like a rental model. Come rent a cabin for a weekend. We'll provide programming, we'll provide food. We came up with a really good set of policies and ways of doing those that we felt extremely comfortable with, and we'll definitely be happy to answer questions and walk through what those are and how it looked at camp. But we developed some policies to put in place to make sure we could do things safely and get people out in nature, having as much interaction as they can, a little breather, something outside of the isolation of their home. And it was pretty successful. I would tell you, we had ran quite a few weekends with no incidents. We had, I believe, twice through our fall where we did catch COVID, pre-symptoms of it before it got into camp. One during camp where we were able to quarantine and isolate and had zero spread from there. And I think it was a testament to if we looked at it hard enough and ensured that we had the right staffing and right people in place and communicated, I think that's the big word, communicated well enough that those policies were going to help us ensure that we kept everybody as safe as possible. So after doing quite a few family camps through the fall, we started really thinking about kids camp again going into the summer, and do we feel safe and confident with it? And of course, with the situation we're in, it's not just how we feel, it's how 60 other partners feel, it's how our board feels, it's how our community feels. And we started an exploration, I think, probably around October, 1st of November, asking lots of questions, making one-on-one phone calls with all types of constituents, to see what they were looking for. What do they need in this experience? Are they comfortable with the idea of doing a kids camp? And if they are, what would it need to look like for them to feel safe in that experience? And so pretty much from the end of October to middle of December, that was our work, just on the phone a lot, talking with various constituents and people that we needed to gather information from. So we developed confidence in moving forward with a kids cohort model. This also came from some of our local lessons learned, both on the good and the bad, from some of the camps that opened up. In Georgia, there was a camp organization who got a lot of press for a big outbreak in COVID, and they were very generous with their time and what they learned, and some helpful suggestions to all of us about how they would have done things differently. And so I think through those processes, we learned a lot, and we, pitched this idea of a kids cohort camp. And what we wanted to do is make sure that we were doing all the screening processes that we possibly could to prevent COVID from coming in. And if we got kids here, that we were ensuring that we were preventing the spread as much as possible if it did get into camp. And that is the two big layers that we wanted to focus on. Dan keeps referring to it as like a block of Swiss cheese. You know, if you slice it up and you turn it and everything, you start to plug some of the holes. It's still the same program, it's still the same block of cheese, but now as you just altered it a little bit, you start plugging some of those holes in it, and it's got to be done in layers. There's no one preventative method. You have to do it in multiple layers, and that's what we kind of looked at: pre-screening, at camp screening, how we're isolating, how we're quarantining, how we're communicating, all these different aspects of how do we really create that each slice of that Swiss cheese to ensure we're plugging as many holes as possible. And Mackenzie, I don't know if you want to pull up the presentation for us, but
Tim, you have that. You need me to do it. You got it. You're the best.
so what we did was we came up with essentially 3 programs that we were going to look at moving into this summer. And Tim, we can go to the second slide there. And working with our partners, 24 out of our 32 partners really wanted to start out our planning with a kids cohort model. And I'll talk more specifically about what it means to us to have a cohort camp. But that we're getting kids a little bit out of that isolation that many of them are experiencing, getting them out in nature, giving families the respite that they need, and giving kids the opportunity to go back to building those skills. We know it's going to look different. It's not going to quite feel the same. We're not going to have that big community feel, but hopefully some of those other outcomes that we have always looked at, like increasing independence, building self-efficacy, those things, we're still going to try and hit those goals throughout the summer. So a majority of our partners really were interested in moving forward with this. We didn't want to put all our eggs in one basket, so we kind of created a decision matrix and how we would decide how we move forward, and wanted to make sure there was multiple options. So we've run family camps. We feel confident in our family camps and the ability to do that. So we created a way to decide and how we would work with our partners to pivot to a family camp program if at any point in time we felt unsafe with a kids camp going forward for the summer. Thirdly, we do have our virtual programs and day camp programs that we can fall back on. We also ran a few day programs for some of our more local groups that are in the immediate area around our camps. Some of this has changed for us since we first introduced these ideas. A lot of our partners are moving away from virtual programming. I think some of it's from virtual fatigue, some of it's their ability to provide staffing and volunteering for a type of program like that. So we're not sure that will be the viable option for us going forward, but we still have it and can implement it if we need it.
And Josh, I think it's actual fatigue of virtual programs. It's not virtual fatigue. Thanks. I'll be here all week. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So Tim, if we move to the timeline, on the next slide, we kind of gave ourselves a pretty clear or pretty hard deadlines for how we're going to approach things this summer. As we talked about, that kind of October through December was our plan creation. Let's socialize these ideas, make sure we get as much feedback. In December, we sat down with our partners, put out a questionnaire to ask more feedback about how they would want to pivot and what kind of programs they're interested in, and making sure that we've had enough buy-in to implement things. Moving into January, we needed a firm commitment from partners. I mean, I think many people, we needed to know what our budgets were going to be for this year, and we're in budgeting season. So we wanted some of those firm commitments and getting our calendar set and ensure that we had enough interest moving forward. All the way to today, where we're have received, and glad to say, 24 of our 35 summer, actually 25 of our 35 summer programs have contracted to have some type of program this summer. So we've got a lot of confidence from our partners to move forward with that. And we'll be going into the next phase of it now of detailing the plans. And we're not going to show a lot about the detailed plans yet, but that's one of the reasons, and particularly Josh is on the phone today. He is in the weeds of building that right now. So, you know, the gnat's eyelash kind of information that we need to ensure that we're creating something very successful for the summer. So we can start answering some of our approaches to various aspects of camp and how we would do it safely. But we have a deadline to have that ready by March 1st, and our first decision point on whether we're going to move forward with a kids camp or a family camp option, or even move down to the virtual camp programs. So we gave ourselves some check boxes, things that and they're very simple, very high level. Our whole methodology that we've been trying to do with all of this stuff, everything we do has to be thought through, but it has to be simple and easy to implement. If it gets so complicated that the people coming can't understand what they need to do when and how it works, then it's just not going to be effective. So same thing for our decision-making process. And for us in Georgia, it's a different situation than other areas of the country. A lot of businesses and schools are open, going in person. So I think I also have to recognize we're in a different situation in our area, right or wrong. It's just different here than other parts of the country. So as long as that was staying the case, as long as kids were still mostly in school, that was one of the metrics we were going to use to move forward with a kids cohort camp, that we needed a majority of the camps on board, and we have checked that box now. And that cases were shrinking, or vaccine availability was going to be available. So we're monitoring that. In Georgia, the cases are falling pretty rapidly, I think, as well as across the rest of the country. But we are hoping that as the warmer weather comes along, that trend will continue. But that's what we're monitoring. And we set out similar check boxes for all the other plans to ensure that both business-wise and safety-wise, we could implement any of these types of programs. And then Tim, if we can go to the next slide. So I told you I'd tell you a little bit for us what kids cohort camp, and please jump in and ask any questions you have along the way. For us, the high level is that we would reduce cabin capacity down to 60% for one of our sites. That's 7 campers and volunteers, others 9. A cohort is, and we're still debating this a little bit, but what a majority of our partners wanted was 2 cabins grouped together would make a cohort, or a travel group, and that can't exceed 2 cabins or more than 16 people in a group. So those are people that are programming together. When they're traveling as a group like that, 2 cabins together, they'll still be wearing face masks. They'll use every opportunity they can to social distance. And we'll be doing some screening processes like temperature checks on daily. We're still in the process of developing what other screening processes there are. As a host site, we usually set minimum standards for what we feel comfortable with. Oftentimes our partners exceed those standards by implementing more rigorous screenings because they're handling the medical aspect and everything. So they'll oftentimes exceed that. They also make some decisions around what happens within the cabin itself. For us, the main thing is that the kids in the cabin are treated like a family group, and that we're knowingly making the decision that things could spread within that cabin, but we're going to limit it through by not spreading to other cabins. So that's our goal with the cabin groupings and then the cohort model itself. Josh can speak towards a little bit about some of the, how do you handle medical staff, or how do you handle the management team and their interactions with the cohorts, because that looks a little bit different. And those are some of the plans that we're kind of creating. But
Yeah.
overall, yeah, go ahead,
Josh, and I'll just, and to reiterate what Josh said, with the travel groups, they are traveling together. So basically they're built with the same schedule, but they are not necessarily being exposed to each other still. So like if they go to the climbing wall, they'll be there together, but they might be on different sides of the climbing wall at the same time. So for us, what it does is, one, it keeps them still as in smaller cohorts, even though they're traveling together. But the other thing it does is, I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but we're definitely seeing our staff numbers of applicants be lower than we would traditionally see. And so this gives us the flexibility to bring in less staff to facilitate activities in the summer.
And meal service is another hard area to kind of figure out. During our family camp process, we did both in dining hall service. Every other table was utilized, and they were about 15 feet apart, each table. And then we also offered to-go services for families, so they could just come pick up from a window, take it anywhere in camp that they wanted. That was pretty easy to facilitate with families. We were curious about how it would work with a kids camp, but it seems overwhelming that most of our partners would like to have a hybrid model like that, where there is some indoor eating and some kind of to-go outdoor capabilities. And we're working through the process of now what that will actually look like. We're really thinking, especially for younger kids, it's going to be a little bit harder to, be a counselor with 5 other kids to try and figure out how a 6-year-old eats picnic style every meal, especially like breakfast. So we may break it up by age or by unit. We're still working through that process, but most likely we'll only have about half a camp in the dining hall and the other half eating somewhere else out on property. Evening programs won't look the same, but we have kind of gotten more inventive about how we do them. One example is things like front porch wars, where we did this with family camps, where they would have materials and they would be given a task to have to build something with random materials that accomplish a certain goal. Like maybe it's, build the next big iPhone or things like that, or a car. And they would go display their car in front of everybody, kind of do like a parade, but they built everything on their porches. So they were kind of engaging with people from a distance, but not in that social, direct social contact. So getting kind of creative and unique in ways that people can interact, but do it from a distance. We also did like movie nights where people had specific spots on our center green, so all outdoor movies, and got to spread out a lot. And those are primary family camps, but we're coming up with new ideas that are creative like that, that limit the need for big group gatherings, but still feels like camp and still kind of gets that same flair that we're used to. And of course meets all the goals. So that was kind of our high level ideas about the things that we needed to look at when creating this. Like I said, we've now got a much larger document that we're preparing for March that includes dining hall programs, general policies, screening and at camp screenings, communications, which I think is probably one of the biggest ones. How do you communicate with parents, families, the community, your board in effective ways, both just in letting them know what we're doing for the summer, what should they expect, but also what happens if, you know, the things we don't want to happen, and how do you communicate when things do go a little bit wrong. And so those are really important to us, to be prepared for any situation. And hopefully we'll have a lot of documents that sit on the shelf that we never use, but that's, we like the preparedness factor of it. Tim, I know you kind of flip forward to the screening protocols. I'll tell you, this is just an example. We haven't decided which of these boxes we'll check yet, but these are some of the considerations, and essentially, as we're working through with partners and medical teams, what do we feel needs to be a part of the pre-screening considerations? You know, just the typical symptom check and temperature check. Do we quarantine, require a quarantine period before camp? Some of those are pretty locked in for us. COVID testing policies, this is the big one that's up to for debate within our organization and our partners as to whether we're doing testing on site or daily testing. That's not something we've put into our policies yet, but requiring a pre-arrival, I believe actually we've moved it to a 5-day, but many of our partners are doing a 72-hour pre-screening test before they come to camp. So these are just the things that we're still working through as to what actually would be our pre-screening considerations and the boxes that we would need to check for moving forward. And we don't have to go through all the details because I want to make sure that we're answering a lot of your questions. I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we're doing, but the next layers of this kind of just are more the same, but how we would do it for family camp or how we would do it for virtual camp and day camp. But it's kind of the same process and just slight tweaks to, you know, what cohorting means and things like that. So I kind of like to take some time for Josh or Dan to talk about anything else that I may have missed, or really take some time to answer any questions or thoughts y'all may have about our process, or anything you may have feedback for us that you've experienced.
Yeah, Josh, thank you. The only thing that I would add is based on our work that we did with our family camps and everything, it's very daunting to think about this, and it does get very complicated. But once we were running camp, even though it was families, it was camp. Felt like camp. It was, it was for us. It was the right thing to do, and it definitely brought those families to a safe place where they were able to connect with each other within their family group. So it was something that, we did all that work and, not sure how it was going to feel or how it was going to, people were going to react to it and all of that. And at the end of the day, it felt like camp, which we were really excited about. And I think that the kids camp model that we're proposing is going to be the same. It's going to be different from what it's been in terms of, mixing cabins and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's about kids at camp growing. And that's what we want.
Yeah, and to add to what Dan said too, I think looking at whatever your goals have traditionally been for camp and keeping them as similar as you can, but knowing that you may have to adjust those slightly. One of the things that we noticed in our family camps was that they weren't as engaging as much with other families as they traditionally would, but they were actually connecting with each other in a lot stronger way than they had in the past. And that was consistent across almost all of our camps. So looking at, maybe they don't interact with another cabin as much, but the bonds that they build within that cabin are going to be significantly stronger because they're together that whole time. So just looking at your goals and just seeing how they may need to be slightly adjusted to meet, the COVID procedures that you're going to have to put in place to run.
We're a huge outcomes-based organization. We're big believers. I think it's just the therapeutic nature of some of our backgrounds and wanting to ensure that we're meeting goals and objectives and that we're proving we're providing a therapeutic and beneficial experience. So the thing that how we've learned, some of the comments that Josh has made, is that we actually got a lot of surveys back, got a lot of our outcomes data back saying, that, yeah, where they may not have made those social connections that they're typically used to, we were still performing extremely high, if not higher, in other areas that were major focuses for us.
Yeah, and the nice thing too, as we looked at it, it did give us a template for how to run summer camp as well. Because if we look at a family that came in, they were essentially a cabin, which is what our intent is for the summer moving forward if we go to the cohort kids camp option. And so for us, it definitely gave us a template to use that we probably won't have to vary significantly to be able to run kids camp from what we did family camp. The cabins just may be a slightly bigger, but as far as how they interact with other groups, it'll be very similar.
So what questions could we answer?
So this is Daniel. I have a lot of questions, so I'm just going to ask one of them and we'll open up to the rest of the people. I'm not sure if we're going to be sharing screen anymore, but if we're going to go into question and answers, I think it might be easiest for us to stop share of the screen.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Talk a little. One of my first initial questions as I'm planning for in-person camp as my first priority is, when does your cohort begin? We're looking to do a pod style as well. Many of our campers are all over the state of California, so we bring them in large buses. We are thinking of possibly not doing buses for this year and looking at 6-passenger to 12-passenger vans. But does your cohort start within the vehicle that they come in? A lot of our families can't drop off our campers, so we have to do transportation. So does that begin the cohort? And then my second part to that is, we bring our counselors in 3 days before our campers come in. And should we put them in their cohorts to not let them mingle in the beginning once they come in, because we don't want them to potentially expose the kids? So I guess just when does that cohort process even begin?
And that's a tremendous question. For us, all of our camps have decided not to use buses this year, we're only doing family drop off. And I know that's got to be a struggle depending on where your campers are coming from and their availability to transportation. So that's probably the hardest one to figure out to me. So we made that kind of decision about the transportation because for us it would begin day one. Whether, if it was on the bus, we would want it cohorted by the bus or by the car, and to ensure that we weren't intermingling at any point in time. For our staff and our volunteers, our staff are coming in, the program staff that lead for the summer are coming in about 3 weeks before camp. They're quarantining at camp, and they'll stay within our bubble all summer long. They're not going to leave that. Any volunteers that we have coming in to be cabin counselors would be cohorting as soon as they arrived at camp as well. And so we're trying to have as many of those conversations with them now, preparing them. It's going to be different. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. We're trying to work through the process of how we provide adequate training to everyone. So for us, when we say cohort, we may be able to all sit out on the center green and put blankets down and all be separated 10 feet apart as we're doing trainings and everything. So they'll see each other and have some good shouting conversations from a distance, but not direct interaction at any point in time. Is that right, Josh? Shoto, that's your area of expertise. I want to make sure I'm saying that right.
Yes, that's correct, Josh.
That does make it, it's hard. And this is where it gets complicated, because it's like, okay, it really is. I mean, like with the staff, they really do have to be cohorted all the time. It's not, we can't have them, okay, we're going to have everybody together for this, but then we'll cohort later. It's that means you've lost the power of the cohort. So it's complicated, and thinking through those things. And every time we sit and talk about something, I think, start thinking through something new. But like the buses and that kind of thing, we've thought a lot about. But even getting the campers to the cabins, how do you do that but maintain your cohort? So all of those things are things that have to be thought through.
Yeah, and then as we're writing out the policies and the way we want to do this, we know that there are going to be times where one cohort may have to interact with another one in small bursts. So your medical team might have to be engaged with campers, or you have an auxiliary staff member who needs to go in for some reason. But what we've looked at is that there's really only 3 reasons that somebody could move into another cohort. One would be prior approval from a director or somebody on a leadership team that says that's okay. 2 would be you have some sort of weather emergency where you just don't have a choice but to get everybody in a safe place. And then 3 would be if there's a medical emergency where the safety of somebody is a greater risk than the spread of COVID. And so those are the 3 things. And then what we're asking is that within those, if that happens, that they're still doing 2 of 3 things. So wearing a mask, being socially distanced, so 6 feet or more, or they're outside. So we're asking that they have to meet at least 2 of those 3 things if they are ever going to have to make that short interaction with another cohort.
And sir, if I missed this, what do you determine as a short interaction? Passing through?
Basically, based on everything that we're understanding from the CDC, anything less than 15 minutes, you're at a significantly less risk of the exposure from somebody else.
And those are the guidelines that our school systems are utilizing. So that's what I think most of the kids and all are expecting. So teachers, their interactions have to be limited to 15 minutes or less within the social distance.
Yeah, and my expectation would be that they're significantly less than that. It's just a minute or 2, just a quick checkup, whatever, and then they're back out of that cohort. And then we're still going through the daily temperature checks and symptom checks just to make sure nothing happened. And then it allows us to know, because of that prior approval, if we did need to contact trace, we had the ability to do that.
And one of the big areas too that you're asking about is how do we do the staff and volunteers, the mental health for those staff and volunteers, as we're asking them to do some things that are different than what they're used to. So we're trying to prepare ourselves from some additional support systems. And Mackenzie yourself's been always a great person to advise us on some of those areas, as well as some activities. We have a specific person that's working on nothing but things for our staff and for our volunteers that will keep them energized and engaged throughout the summer that may look different, and ensuring that they don't feel too isolated in this process.
Yeah, and I think it also changes the way we do some of our training in a lot of ways. So we typically have our program staff that are here all summer, and in a traditional year we would have them as cabin buddies. So they're going in the cabin helping out during the week. Well, we're not doing that this year because we don't want to have that cross exposure there. But we know that as we bring volunteers in, that means they may be, in a prior rainy day situation, they could all go into the gym and you can play basketball. Well, we know that that's not an option now. So volunteers or staff are going to need a different set of resources to be able to program in a cabin. And so thinking about how do you teach that and deliver that, and what are those resources that you can give them that may have been different than the past?
I have so many more questions, but I don't want to take up this whole conversation. So I'll leave space for someone else to jump in before I say my next one.
I'll jump in. This is Marissa. And this might be not the smartest question I've ever asked, but our camp in particular, we have a lot of volunteers up there leading ropes activities, arts and crafts, tie-dye. How are you guys managing that to avoid cross exposure within these cohorts? Because that's kind of our biggest question, is how do we program a camp as a whole without kind of cross exposing other groups?
I'll defer to you, Josh.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we've thought a lot about this as we do it. So we are, again, requiring what I mentioned earlier about 2 of the 3 requirements that need to be met. So we're asking that of every staff member. We know that they're kind of in the same bubble, but we're trying to keep them as socially distant as possible. We know there are certain activities such as, if they're going on the zip line or on the ropes course, that the likelihood is that staff are closer. So in doing some research with our ropes course vendor, one of the suggestions we got was maybe in those scenarios where it's closer that it's more than just two of those three things. So not only are you wearing a mask when you're putting somebody on the zip and sending them off, but you also have a face shield as well. So finding ways to just double up when that's going to happen. So we've looked at all of our programs and figured out which ones we think that that's a possibility to have close contact. And in reality, it's not that many for us. At archery, other places, we can step back a little bit and just use the volunteers that are in those cabins as to take the place of maybe some of the things that we would have done traditionally, but we're still there to watch, keep an eye on safety. We can facilitate from 6 feet or farther away. And so that's how we've navigated that through looking at each of our activities.
And Marissa, it's one of my goals for this summer, because I think we started seeing it with family camps. I'm excited to see how our program leadership team might actually become better leaders because of this distance teaching. Quite often we see our staff stepping in, like creating that independence is a huge thing for our kids. If our staff are stepping in too much, they're not allowing our kids to explore and discover maybe in the way they need to. And this distance kind of teaching and coaching, I think, might be actual benefit to us in the long run and being better at leading programs. So we're going to be looking at that a little bit more and exploring it as a hopeful good outcome of what we're doing.
Yeah, and we've set some parameters around the size of the groups that are allowed that are different from our traditional numbers to help us with the social distancing aspect. The other thing that we've done is really looked at our cleaning procedures for each activity and what that means. So what are you doing before? What are you doing after? What are you doing in between groups? And so we've provided program boxes at every area that includes hand sanitizer, disinfectant spray, gloves, masks, wipes, and every activity has a box like that so that in between uses, either before or after, wherever it may be, that they have the supplies right there on hand to immediately do it. We're never leaving anything sitting so the next group can come and have to wonder whether it was cleaned or not. That's going to be done before and after every single session, regardless of who's there or what activity is happening.
And Josh has detailed out most of our activity protocols pretty extensively. So just activity by activity. And I think we would be happy to share that. Our timeline to finish our master protocols for all camp operations, our draft is due by March 1st, and we'll be rolling out within 2 weeks of that, of March 1st, so no later than March 15th. Once we have that fully developed, I'd be happy to share it with the rest of the group too, so you see our detailed plan for each area of camp. What other questions could we help answer? Or if you have thoughts about things that you've learned, we'd love to learn from the group as well.
Go ahead, Daniel. You keep muting and unmuting. I think, because I see that we have like 6 more minutes. But I think everybody here who's on the call, unless I'm wrong, I think everybody did virtual programs for last summer. I know Anita with North Carolina did a day camp, kind of like a day. And so I think everybody, this has been really helpful to kind of hear how you're approaching it, because we're all kind of in the same boat about just nobody did it last year. We all pivoted to virtual and then have spent the rest of the time trying to figure out. But Daniel, I know you have some more good questions because they're good. What you have. They're really helpful.
I think Kristen had a question, so I'm going to give her, I saw her also unmute, so I'll let her ask before.
Well, I agree with Mackenzie. Your questions are all the things that have been floating in my head, but I had one question about the quarantining before camp. It looks like you were asking people to quarantine for 2 weeks prior to camp. Was that, in reality, how did that go?
So it's one of the check marks that's still up in the air. We did, we're planning to ask that of the campers. What we're trying to work through, we know we can do it with our staff. We know we probably can do it with our campers. Can we do it with our volunteers? I don't know that that's a reality. So it's still one of those check boxes we have not decided on that we will in the next couple of weeks, because we might just have to rely on pre-screen testing.
Yeah, and the Camping Association, American Camp Association, did a great job of crunching some data, and that was one of the things that they found really didn't reduce the risk. So it is one of those things. It's because I think 85% of the people probably go, yes, I quarantine, except for that one trip and that one, it's like, that is one that's not, I think it's more of a PR thing of, hey, be conscious of where you go rather than it really is in terms of effectiveness. Because what the ACA found is it did not reduce the risk at all.
So I have two questions as we're getting close on time. One, we're looking to potentially have 2 medical staffs related to camp, one designated COVID, one designated for our scratches and boo-boos that we get during camp. However, we're all volunteer run, well, besides myself and a few other people who are paid through the organization. But so that means our nurses and our medical staff are volunteers. I know camp nurses and medical staff are short. One, I think the burnout rate in anyone who's working in the medical field is really high right now because the amount that they're having to work. Like, where are people finding nurses, or like, is anyone else having this issue? And then 2, when it comes to exposure and there is a positive case on camp, when is the deciding factor that you decide that now it's spread to a second person, that it's time to close camp down, or how do we continue it from not spreading? Like, when's that pull mark of, all right, and especially for a lot of us, because I think we're all around a week. So if it's like on day 2 and I have 2 people exposed, or maybe it's 2 different people from 2 different pods, is that the call, or when do you guys make that call?
For us, if it exceeded one cohort, so we found multiple cohorts, our first step would be quarantine those groups, and then go to the Department of Public Health. That's their first step that they require here in Georgia, and seek advice. But at that point in time, we'd follow their guidance, but most likely, if we noticed that it had spread beyond more than one cohort, we'd probably have to make some decisions about, shutting down that week and sanitizing and starting over.
And then any documentation you have, I did send a message earlier. Can we share this PowerPoint to our members who are not available today to review it? And then I know that you said you had some other documentations. I'm personally looking for waivers, COVID waivers of liability or anything related to COVID. I'm trying to keep my application intact as it is because I use Camp Docs, and then just add any additional amendments into COVID related for people to sign off. So if anyone has any information regarding COVID waivers or liability or communication that they're giving out to parents or families, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to share this document. Like I said, this was our initial pitch document to open up summer camp. I would love to share with y'all as soon as we have everything else developed, so you can see. And that your question just a second ago, things like how do we decide if we have to close down camp or anything, all of that will be in that document that we'll have out in the next 3 weeks probably. So yeah, I would be happy to share. I would say in Georgia, depending on your state, the waivers are going to look a lot different. Ours is covered by a pretty general blanket statement that's not too different than our typical waiver, because Georgia doesn't require a lot of detail around that, as well as liability. In Georgia, we have basically a sign you have to post at the gates that says that if you are entering this premises, the owners of the facility are not under any liability to your COVID.
All right, any other questions? It is 1 o'clock.
I did just want to add one thing too. You know, Josh talked earlier about communication and just how important it was, because one of the things that we were thinking about is, you know, we can send out all kind of emails and flyers and all about what the expectations are going to be at camp. But one of the things that made it a lot better for us in terms of how families were understanding coming to camp, and something we'll probably do for summer, is that we actually created videos that walk them through the entire process from the time they arrive at the gate and then throughout the entire weekend. And so I'll actually drop if you can hold on a second, I'll drop a link to both videos for both locations in the chat, and you're welcome to use those. But it really helped us, and the feedback we got from the families was that those really helped us understand the process and how it was going to be different than the way we've done it in the past.
I agree, that is huge, just the communication overall. And that's how we kind of live with this whole thing, making sure that we were talking to as many people as we could and making the communication as simple as possible. The videos are great because it's just a great visual to see how things will be different. Well, thank you all so much for allowing us to join today. And Mackenzie, you're welcome to share our contact information, and we're happy to answer any other questions via email or set up another phone call or whatever. So
Yeah,
This
thank
is
you
really
all so-
helpful, you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I know that you guys, they make it look so effortless, but these are three men who are very high demand. So thank you all for your time. We can see, we want to kind of focus on different topics that people need, but we may see if we have you guys come back again, if it's helpful as we get closer. I see a lot of heads nodding, so we may see if we can twist your arms to have you come back. But thank you all so much for your time and expertise. And I think it's pretty obvious these are three people who are really passionate about camp. And I think that that's what's really great for all of us, is this is an organization full of people that love camp and are very passionate about making camp work even in these strange times. So thank you all.
Mackenzie, I think, just for the record, I think I need to end every Friday with you, because man, I feel good now. This is good.
I know if we had Dennis on here, he'd try to bring you down, but
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
yeah, that's great. No, really, we appreciate y'all's time so much, and your expertise it's so cool that the camp community is so collaborative. I think that's you don't get that in a lot of business. Everybody's trying to hide what they're doing over here and do it well. But it's a great thing about camp is that we can collaborate and learn from each other. And thank y'all for being so open to share all your resources, and definitely watch those videos, because you'll get to see the amazing camp facilities.
Yeah, and the only thing I would just add, in case anybody isn't aware of it, and I'm sure you probably all are, the ACA's done some great work around this, and their planning tools that they have on their website that are, you don't have to be a member or anything to do those. Those have been really helpful for us. So
I'll reiterate that the field guide, definitely taking a look at that if you haven't looked at it, is a great resource to build out your protocols and procedures for the summer.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Everybody have a lovely weekend.
All right. Have a great weekend, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
bye y'all.
Hey, Ron. I'm waving at you. Ah!
Hey.
You're on mute. Unmute so we can hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm kind of at work, so I've been sort of preoccupied part of the time. But anyway, let's see the baby.
She's
Is she
asleep,
there?
I think.
Oh,
Hold on, let me
dang.
see. Let me see. She's got a rough go. Let me check. My husband's up there with her. If not, you'll get to see her freak out when she realizes that I'm here. How's life in the SLC?
It's great. It's just loving life. Just everything's going really good. Just
Good.
excited to start camp this year. We're really been putting a lot of effort into getting things lined up, and I think we got a good program, and I think we're going to make it happen. So Kristen and Jill have been working really hard, and
We all have. It's,
yeah,
oh man.
it's exciting. Yeah, but some good things today. I'm glad I made it on finally.
I'm glad you did too.
Okay.
And Tim, are you gonna
One-
make copies of all those links and stuff?
Yeah, I grabbed them so I can.
Awesome.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
grabbed him too. Okay, I'm gonna get in.
Rach, have you met Tim?
I think a long time ago.
We
Good to
met at
see
the
you.
IABC in 2018.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
so Tim's
good.
with the Colorado group.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the board.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yay. We kind of hit the jackpot with our 2 new board members. So
Thank you.
That is true.
Yeah.
If we had to lose some, we gained some too. Rex, there's been a move to bring you back. There's been a conversation.
Oh, well, I'll
Katie
do
says we're
whatever.
not allowed to have 2 people from the same camp. It's in the bylaws.
We're trying to find a way around it. You want to say hi? Did you just get out?
Mhm.
Come here. Go say hi to your friends. Do you see me?
Oh gosh, she's growing up so much.
I know she's a year old.
That's
say
right.
hello?
Yeah.
He's got that post-nap
Hi.
face.
Oh,
Yes,
she's such a
baby.
doll. Oh, that's
Hi,
great.
friends.
Aren't they fun?
They are. They're a lot of work and a lot of fun. You say hi?
Yeah, I get to enjoy grandkids now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my mom's like, that's her jam because grandparents get to be fun and then walk away.
Yep. Here you go.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Well, I've had my arm twisted to come stay at my son's house while they do a little getaway, and the 4 boys, and
Ooh.
yeah, ages 4 to 13 at the time, and but still fun.
Yeah.
So
There's just something like I used to babysit all the time, and there's just something very liberating when it's not your kid
Yeah.
because the pressure's just not there. The stress when
Right.
they do things, so you're like, this is endearing and adorable.
Yeah.
yeah,
And guess what? I don't have to worry about what are the long-term consequences of this
Nope.
behavior.
Like,
Exactly.
No, we can stay up late and jump on the bed, and then I'm like, all right, fun aunt's leaving. Yeah. Yeah.
well,
is that what you
Mackenzie,
said?
you're just being too hard on yourself being a mother for the first time. I mean,
Maybe
that's-
true.
That is a stressful thing because you're second guessing yourself on everything.
Yeah.
hmm Especially when that report came out about all the baby food with toxic heavy metals. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
do they make a baby detox? Yeah, it's like I try to just let it go though and be like, well, it is what it is. There's a lot of stuff. I think it happened. So we were talking about that one day, Kristen, like everything. My grandmother gave my mom something that had like opium in it when she was younger. Like, like they didn't know, like she gave her something, but in hindsight, my girl was like, she slept like a baby. I'm like, she was on drugs.
Mhm. Well, and the thing that was so amazing with me about that conversation I had with my mom is she really didn't think there was anything wrong with giving me she gave me phenobarbital.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like Chloe
Yeah.
was this awful hard baby. And I remember just calling my mom in tears and I'm like, she's been crying for 14 hours. And my mom was like, well, just give her a little phenobarbital. I'm like, Mom,
It's not a thing now, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you turned out fine. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I was a surgeon or something.
I grew up, my dad would slip us alcohol.
Yeah. Whiskey.
Mhm.
I
Oh,
love
yeah.
that.
Same here.
Didn't your grandmother used to do that? Give y'all whiskey? Yeah, my husband's grandmother did that.
Yep.
My dad used to rub whiskey in our gums when we had
Yep.
really loose teeth.
Yep.
Oh.
Exactly. Nom.
I think I'm gonna go do that.
What, rub whiskey on your teeth?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go rub whiskey on my own teeth. I'm kidding. I don't even like whiskey.
Awful.
That's awesome.
Well, it's so good to see all of you.
It's good
Yes.
to see you.
Stand by.
Oh,
Okay.
I love the waving.
Oh, she's such a doll. Wow.
Can you clap for him? Can you show me a clap? Yay!
Yay!
If something's
what-
on TV and people are clapping, she stops what she's doing and starts clapping. She's like
That's
really a hype
awesome.
girl. She's the hype girl.
Well, smart girl. You gotta get your people going. Yay!
Right, right.
Well, we'll see everybody in Illinois, right? Will we see
Who?
everybody in Illinois at the workshop?
I hope
in
so.
per- In
Yeah.
person?
Mm-hmm.
I hope so. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the hope.
that's the plan for sure.
Yep.
Perfect. Well,
Okay.
you guys take care and have a lovely weekend.
You too.
You did the same.
Thank you.
Okay, talk to you next week.
Good seeing y'all. Bye-bye.
Guys. Bye.